YouTube live चालू केलाय आता. YouTube live is streaming now. I think you can start making an introduction. Recording ही चालू करा side by side. YouTube live चालू केलाय आता. YouTube live is streaming now. I think you can start.
I think we'll start. Welcome all on this nice sunny Sunday morning, and I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Mohini Vidwans and Ian sir. I had been to Christchurch. I had seen the Quail Island, and it's a very exemplary work. They are being carried out by volunteers, and it's a team effort, and I was really impressed. I know how difficult it is to work on the field for 25-30 years, and they have been doing this job since 1997. And I asked them about their survival rate of plants. Their survival rate is more than 90%. Most of their plants are surviving. That shows how much dedication and effort has gone into that conservation. And that's why we are very happy at Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini to welcome Mohini and Ian sir to this unique presentation. Now I'll request Priya madam to introduce Dr. Mohini and Ian sir.
Thank you. Welcome Dr. Mohini and welcome Ian sir. We are really very happy to have you on this platform. I will introduce Dr. Mohini, but I'll call her Mohini. Mohini माझी बाल मैत्रीण आहे, and I know her for past 40 years. She is an academician by profession, a thorough researcher, a great teacher. म्हणजे लहानपणापासून तिला मेडल्स घेण्याची सवय आहे. She completed MCom with gold medal, MBA from UK. Her first PhD is from Pune University in management. She has received special training from IIM Ahmedabad. Her second PhD is from Lincoln University, New Zealand, in career crafting of women. She has presented lots of research papers in New Zealand and internationally. She is a humble person and a true nature lover. मला माहिती आहे जेव्हा ती PhD लिंकन मध्ये करत होती तेव्हा ती she used to work for 18 hours on weekdays, and she used to go for volunteering on weekends. That shows her dedication and passion. I'm very happy to have you here, Mohini. I request you to introduce Ian sir and go for your presentation. खूप आनंद वाटतो. It's like dream come true. You are here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Priya. It's really an honor for me, and I'm just so happy to reconnect to my Pune friends, to green friends in Pune, Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini. मला माझ्या वेताळ टेकडीची आठवण होती आता. संध्याकाळी मी पुण्यात असताना मुलींना आणि माझ्या कुत्र्याला घेऊन वेताळ टेकडीवर जायची आणि आम्ही तिथे बरीच झाडं पण लावली होती तेव्हा. आणि that was kind of my beginning of my conservation work, I think. First, I think I'll just talk a little bit about Quail Island, what Quail Island actually, where it is and all. And then I'll introduce Ian, if that's okay. So I'll just share the presentation.
Pollution index
just wait, huh?
Just wait. Please mute everybody. Patak sir,
मी करतो एकेकाला म्यूट.
Bhargavitai, mute kara. Okay, now you can start.
Okay, thank you.
Madhukar Patane, त्यांना म्यूट करायला पाहिजे.
केलं.
Okay, may I start now?
Yeah, you can start, please.
Okay, thank you, Sunil. Thank you to महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी, ज्याच्यामुळे आपण आज रिकनेक्ट झालेलो आहोत. आणि मी जसं मगा सांगत होते की conservation is my hobby. My main profession is really I'm an academic. आणि खरं सांगायचं तर क्वेल आयलंड मध्ये माझा खारीचा वाटा आहे, म्हणजे मी खूप थोडं काम करते. And Ian is the main pillar of Quail Island Restoration Trust, which I'll talk about him a bit more later. So Quail Island, as you see here in the image, that's Quail Island, which is situated near Christchurch. And I just thought that before we start talking about the trust, I will just introduce you to where actually Quail Island is, because I think among the people who are attending this presentation today, probably Sunil and Priya are the only people who have been there and who know where it is. So I'll just talk about it a bit more here. So as you see here, that's the Quail Island here. And Ian and I, so this is Littleton, and we are sitting here behind these hills. So that's where we are right now. So as you can see that Quail Island is not very far from where we are. And it's a very small island near Christchurch. Interesting thing about New Zealand is that there are about 600 small islands around New Zealand. So we basically have 3 main islands, the North Island, South Island, and Stewart Island. And we have 600 small islands. And I think the beauty of islands is that it's more controllable what we do there. So there are islands like Tiritiri, Machangi, which is near Auckland, or we have Kapiti Island near Wellington, or for example, Quail here near Christchurch, where a lot of conservation work has been going on for the past few decades. And we are also seeing the fruit of all that work that has been going on there. So just to give you a perspective of where Quail Island is, and you can see how beautiful it is. So it's really a pleasure to go and work there on the weekends, as Priya was saying. Banks Peninsula is the region here, and as you can see, Christchurch is over here, and Quail Island is just around here, which you can't, can you? Just there. Yeah. So as you can see in this image, that Banks Peninsula, I mean, everywhere in the world, I think we all have seen the devastating effect of human invasion. Unfortunately, wherever we go, we mindlessly use the natural resources to our own benefit without really thinking of the greater planet. So here you can see that this is the green cover that was there around 1870. So this is quite a few decades after the European settlers arrived here. And this is how it was around 1920. So it didn't take very long for the European settlers and also for the Maori people to consume all the resources, or rather to burn sometimes the forests in order to make room for their animals or for their farms. So only about 1.5% native forest remained in a very short period of time. So unfortunately, this was the case, but you know, to be on the positive side, things are changing now. And we are making lots of efforts to restore the native cover here in Quail Island. So this is an image of Quail Island again. As you can see that there was farming done there, and there was a Watt family, and they used to make butter and sell it in the local market as well. So as I said earlier, the Maori arrived here in New Zealand and in Quail Island about 700 years ago. And they called it different names. First, they called it kawa kawa, which is a type of plant. then Otamahua is the name that's more prevalent now. And basically it means the place where children collected seabirds' eggs. So the Maori never stayed on the island. They never settled down there, but they mainly went there and they collected seabirds' eggs, or they collected the other resources. The island really changed when the European settlers got here in 1842. And Captain Smith, who got here in 1842, what he saw was quail. So this is the native quail, koreke. And this was abundantly available everywhere. And of course, as you can understand, soon it became extinct. And it was wiped out soon after that. But still the island is called Quail Island. And the quail we see today here on the island, they are the Californian quails. So just a brief history about island again. So the island was, as you saw, that the Europeans came here. The land was bought from the Maori, the whole Banks Peninsula, and island was a part of that purchase. So the land was leased out for farming and for various other business commercial purposes as well. But this was really an island in isolation because as you know, New Zealand is a new country. It's a country of immigrants. So we had a lot of people come here from Europe, and this was mainly used as a human quarantine station. So from 1875, they started using it for human quarantine for the people who had been on the ships for 100 days or more. Obviously, all the diseases were passed on to each other. So this is where they stayed before they went to the main island. It was also a leper colony. Not many lepers were here. Only about 9 lepers were there in the colony. And it was in operation for only about 16 years or so. But still, it's known as a leper colony in New Zealand, Quail Island. So the buildings that you see right now, none of them, they exist today. In fact, the buildings were burnt down because people with diseases lived there. So the locals were afraid of the germs and the viruses. So they were burned down. So you don't see anything today on the island. The island has a lot of historical value in the sense that it was used in the Antarctic exploration. So Scott used it first, then Shackleton, as you see here, the Siberian ponies, then the huskies, which are being trained here. So the animals were kept in quarantine as well as they were trained here. And this piece I found really interesting for us Indians is that there were Himalayan mules that were sent as a contribution from the British Indian government to the expedition in 1911. So the island, as you can see, has been used for various purposes, but in 1975, it was declared as a recreation reserve. And kind of, that was the time when the nature could breathe again, I think. And a lot of efforts were made after that. So today, as you can see, it's a very beautiful place. And in summertime, people can kayak there, they can go by boat. You have a ferry ride twice a day that takes you there. So it's easily accessible from Christchurch. It's only about a 10-minute ferry ride from there. So it's very widely used for recreation purposes. So coming back to our main topic of presentation, which is Ecological Restoration Trust, Quail Island. That was founded in 1997. And this young man you see here in the image, the one who is sitting next to me.
That was 20 years ago.
So Ian McLennan, he came here with, went there with his brother and hasn't left since. And in fact, Ian is the pillar of our trust. And as Priya was saying earlier, you need dedication and passion. And like I said to you, I have a very small part to play in the Quail Island Trust or the activities, but Ian is really the main force behind it. He is there for every volunteer trip, and he takes all the executive decisions and organizes everything around there. So I'll pass it on to Ian for the further presentation.
Thank you, Mohini. Thank you very much for letting me talk today. Oops. Let's get back to that one.
Yeah, okay.
I think Mohini mentioned the old name of the island as Kawa Kawa. So this image here, the green leaves are the Kawa Kawa plant, and the O in Otamahua has got a stylized Kawa Kawa leaf. So Kawa Kawa was a very valuable plant to Maori for ceremonial and medicinal purposes. And we adopted it as an emblem for the island because it's at its southernmost limit on Quail Island. It doesn't grow any further south, so we're rather pleased we have it on the island. So we've got a couple of photos, aerial photographs here of the island. The one on the top left was taken in the early 1960s during the time that it was farmed. And the rows of trees on the island, which we call shelter belts in New Zealand, because they provide shelter for crops and for livestock. There was a big storm in 1968, and most of those shelter belts were blown down. And as you can see on the image in the bottom right, which was taken a couple of years ago, there's very little remaining of those main shelter belts through the centre of the island. So the farming stopped pretty much when the shelter belts had been blown down because it affected the farming operations because the fences were all destroyed. So that, as Mohini said before, by 1975, the island became a recreation reserve. So the island is administered by a government department called the Department of Conservation. And the Department of Conservation also administer all our national parks in New Zealand. So they're the driving force in conservation in the country. So we have an arrangement with the Department of Conservation that they'll allow us to eradicate the pests on the island and plant trees on the island. Just want to give the island a bit of context about why we would bother to restore the ecology on the island. And Mohini's already touched on this. So we're thinking back, New Zealand is a very isolated country out on its own in the South Pacific. And all the wildlife here evolved separately. So the birds, the reptiles, the insects all evolved separately from the rest of the world. And we have no native mammals. There are no native mammals in New Zealand apart from 2 species of small bats. So everything evolved here without any predators. So there were no ground-dwelling predators at all. And that is why kiwi and kakapo and takahi lost the use of their wings, because there was no need for them to fly. There were no predators to escape from. And so when Maori arrived, they brought a Pacific rat with them. And when Europeans started arriving here 200 years ago, of course, they brought all their pests with them, their rats, their stoats, their ferrets, their weasels, their hedgehogs, their possums, their cats, and the list just goes on and on and on. So you have all these ground-dwelling predators arriving in the country, and you have all these birds and reptiles who are not used to confronting predators. So they were defenseless. And so that's why we have lost an enormous amount of species in New Zealand, and many extinctions have happened. So Quail Island was an ideal candidate for restoration because of the water barrier. Even though there are 600 odd islands in New Zealand, this part of the country, there are only 3 of any size, and Quail Island is the biggest. Might need to, let's move on. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to, this next slide is Dr. Colin Burrows. So Dr. Colin Burrows was a botanist from Canterbury University, and Colin was the brains behind this replanting project. So Colin knew the island intimately, and he knew where things would grow and what would grow. So the concept of the ecological restoration started with Colin and one of his students, and resulted in a master's thesis, which was published in 1997. So a group of interested people had a public meeting and a trust was formed. And we wrote a restoration plan for the island soon after that. And in everything we do, we follow that restoration plan. So the exciting part of the year is August, when we do our planting. So this photo here shows the day when we transfer our plants to the island. So this is a vessel provided by the local port company, and we load the vessel up with around 3,000 plants. So here is a photograph of that same vessel arriving at Quail Island. So we plant around 3,000 trees a year. When we first started, we planted around 6,000 to 7,000. It was an enormous undertaking, and 3,000 is much easier to cope with. We rely on our volunteers for doing all the planting. We have work days on the island first and third Sunday of every month, and every weekend day during August. So this is a typical group of volunteers arriving on the island for a Sunday morning's work. And some typical photos of the areas we plant. So we're planting in the midst of pasture grasses, which we spray off with glyphosate during the year to make it easier to do the planting. And the orange plastic sleeves you see as a patented system of plant protector. So it consists of a woolen mat at the bottom of the tree and a plastic sleeve held in place by 4 stakes. So we've been using these now for 4 or 5 years, and they've increased the survivability, the survival rate of the trees, and certainly improved the rate of growth. They also provide frost protection, and they also provide a degree of protection from deer browsing them. They also protect the plant from the weed growth. The photograph on the left, you'll see the area we've sprayed off, but an area of fresh grass there. So come midsummer, that grass is chest height on me. So these trees get totally engulfed in weeds. So having the guards around them gives the plant a fighting chance. Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, is this animated, is it?
Yeah, just the first one. Yeah.
Okay. So this is me planting some trees in August.
And I took those photos, so just last month.
Yes. As you can see, it was a cold day. We plant in August, which is generally our wettest month of the year. July and August are our wettest month. But this year, for the very first time, we didn't have to cancel any of the planting days due to bad weather. But we do need some more rain on the island. The rainfall on the island is quite small, 600 mil to 800 mil a year. So that's 24 to 30 inches. 24 to 30 inches. So it does get pretty desperate for water during the summer months. So the two plants I'm holding in that left-hand photograph is a broadleaf in my left hand and Kānuka in the right hand. We generally plant majority of two species, Kohuhu and Kānuka, the one in my right hand. And we describe them as nursery species. We will plant them and let them grow on for 10 to 15 years. Once they're at that age, they form what we call canopy closure, when the trees meet at the top and they shade out all that pasture grass underneath. The grass dies, leaf litter starts to form, and we get regeneration happening underneath the canopy. So what we can do at that stage then is go through with frost intolerant or wind intolerant trees and increase the diversity of the forest. So in that right-hand photograph there, you'll see the woolen mat that sits on the ground, and that stops the weeds coming up around the plant. Ideally, they should be larger than that, but cost restraints mean we use the smaller mats.
So just to add to that, Ian always gives a demonstration before the planting starts, because we have a lot of people who have no experience in planting, because it's really important to do all the steps correctly. And I think that increases the survival rate a lot.
Yes.
And Ian gives an excellent demonstration every time.
Yes, but because we're a voluntary organisation and we have to raise funds to buy these plants, Mohini and myself and all our regular volunteers, we're very protective of our trees, and we can't have people playing around and not doing it properly because we're just wasting money. So we keep our volunteer groups down to 15 to 20 people, so we can keep our eye on people's planting technique to make sure that it's done properly. I'm always telling people that it's not a race. We want it done. We want it done well. We're not looking for whoever is the fastest planter. Okay. And I mentioned the plant guards before. So the ones we've been using in the past have been plastic, and we've been trying to get away from plastic, as we all are. So these new ones here are manufactured from heavy grade cardboard, and they only require 2 bamboo sticks to hold them in place where the other ones had 4. And they appear to be more robust. They don't get blown away, and deer have also got a habit of pulling the plastic ones off. So far so good. The deer haven't developed that habit with these new ones. So there's an example of putting it in place, and you can see the woolen mat at the bottom. And the final thing we do is to get some dead grass and place it on the bare soil around the plant. We try and cover the bare soil as best we can, because if you can cover the bare soil, it does reduce the number of weeds that are growing.
Did you tell them, Ian, about deer swimming across the water? Because they
No.
must be wondering that
Okay.
how do we get deer on the island?
Yes, I've got a photograph of the fallow deer further on.
Okay.
But the island, at very low tide, the island there is a land bridge at the back of the island. So pests can come across the mudflats at very low tide, and deer will come across. But even if the mudflats weren't there, deer are very good swimmers. They would swim across. We have a problem around the entire region with a population explosion of deer, which has happened over the last 15 years. So it's not a historical problem, it's a new problem. And this photograph was taken just a couple of, on 23rd of August, our final planting day. So we've been planting since 1998, so 22 years of planting, and we've hit the 100,000th tree, which we're pretty proud of. It's a big number, and as noted down the bottom, roughly 5,000 to 6,000 volunteer hours go into the project every year. And this year we've had 167 volunteers on our 8 planting days. So this is an example of what the grass looks like in December. Believe it or not, there are trees planted in there, but they've completely disappeared into the long grass. So that's what the trees have to fight against. So I was going to look at some of the older plantings to see what we can expect to see, the results we can expect to see. This is 1999. These trees would be 8 meters tall, and they've been planted in the shelter of one of the remaining shelter belts. So we've got extremely good growth here, and it's a relatively wet site. Another area more exposed to the east and more exposed to the sun. The year 2000 in the foreground, 2007, 2008 in the distance. So these trees are quite stunted from the constant wind exposure. I do recall planting in this area. We planted in snow 1 August in this region here. And surprisingly, that's where the best growth has been. But different parts of the island function differently. Some areas are more fertile than others, and others get more water. So it's been very much trial and error as to what works where. An area planted in 2000, again, this has got a more southerly aspect, a bit more sheltered and a bit wetter. 2001 on the left and 2012 here on the right. (2004, 2006) again on a southerly facing slope with good moisture. These slides are actually a few years old now. The growth has been good in the last few years, so I should replace these slides. And again, the Stockdam Valley area, which I mentioned was the wettest part of the island, so the growth has been very good here. And just note the snow on the hills in the background. So after 20 years of planting, we get these trees maturing and producing fruit, producing seed for the first time. So this is a photograph of a tree called a lancewood. And these are both the same plant. The one on the left-hand side is a juvenile, and the tree on the right-hand side, it's reached maturity and is fruiting. So this tree has evolved in the presence of moa. Moa are an extinct bird, a bit like an ostrich, but much bigger, up to 3 meters tall. And botanists suppose that the lancewood evolved in this way as a protection against the grazing of moa. So with the downward facing leathery leaves, it's virtually impossible for a bird to browse on it. And once it gets to that 3 meter height, it forms a bush at the top, loses all the downward pointed leaves and can fruit. And numbers of our trees have a similar difference between juvenile and mature stages. And two more examples of trees which are now fruiting after 20 years, Kaikamako on the left and Totara on the right. Totara is a tree which doesn't reach maturity for probably 400 or 500 years. They are massive, tall trees, much prized by Maori for carving of canoes and decorative work. So we had the first fruiting on this one about 3 years ago, and we've now got seedlings happening. So as soon as we get that regeneration happening, things are starting to work really well. The other thing we do is plant silver tussock, Poa seta, it's a New Zealand native grass, which was planted around the summit of the island.
I must say that the summit of the island, it's 86 meters high.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 200 feet, is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the result of the planting around the summit. So when Europeans arrived on the island, the summit of the island was covered in silver tussock, so we were trying to recreate that. Right, so looking at our restoration plan, one of the measures of our success is to whether our native birds will come to the island and, more importantly, nest and stay on the island. So it's taken us many years, but by 2016 we had these 3 birds confirmed as nesting on the island. Top right, we've got Kotomako, which is the common English name is the bellbird. Bottom right is the shining cuckoo, and bottom left is kereroo, which is a New Zealand native wood pigeon. And these birds were chosen as indicators of success because they have different food sources. The bellbird is mainly a nectar feeder, but will also eat fruit, insects, and spiders. The shining cuckoo in the bottom right eats a diet exclusively of caterpillars and also can tolerate hairy caterpillars. And the kereroo will eat ripe fruit and leaves. So by 2016, all these birds were nesting on the island. So what that proves is that we're able to supply these birds with a year-round food supply, and they choose to make the island their home. So it's been a great achievement that over 20 years we've turned a barren farm into a bit of native bush, which is starting to develop well. The other thing we have on Quail Island is penguins. So this is the white-flippered penguin, which is an endemic species to the Banks Peninsula area. And there's only around 4,000 pairs of these animals left on the island. 4,000 pairs left in Banks Peninsula. The list on the bottom right shows the bird counts we've done over the years. And as you can see, we peaked at 41 active burrows in 2007. And we've gone right down to 4 or 6 between 2017, 2018. We don't really know why that is. We hope that it will improve. But because they're ground nesting birds and we've got rid of all the predators on the island, it should be an ideal place for them to nest. The photograph in the middle is of a penguin detection dog. This dog was trained to find penguin burrows. Penguins are pretty hard to find. You can only really find them through noise and through smell. So having a dog which is trained to sniff them out is quite valuable. We use dogs a lot in this country for border protection work, for finding drugs in people's luggage, and finding food that people want to bring into the country. We've also got rat detection dogs and stoat detection dogs. So we've had rat detection dogs on the island for the last few years, and they're a very useful tool to make sure that we haven't had rats returning. And also no ecosystem is really complete without thinking about the invertebrates as well. So Mike Bowie, an ecologist on the trust who works at Lincoln University where Mohini teaches, he has been introducing invertebrates to the island for the last 20 years. So on the left we have a Banks Peninsula tree wetter in a purpose-built wetter motel, we call them, and it's sharing that space with a Canterbury gecko. Again, it's a New Zealand native gecko. And this particular beetle, Megadromus guernii, Mike introduced that numbers of years ago in 2004, and he thought he'd lost them all, but we discovered them quite happily surviving on the island last year. So just talking about the pest eradication, when we started the project, the island was still infested with animals. The rabbit population was so great that all the grass had disappeared pretty much, and the rabbits were climbing the trees to eat the bark off the pine trees. There were so many of them. So over the years, all of those animals have been eradicated from the island. The only one which we can't get rid of is mice. Mice are notoriously difficult to eradicate. We did an aerial bait drop in 2009, which was successful for around about 7 months, but they came back again with a vengeance. The type of poison that we used back in 2009, we wouldn't consider using it again, so we will have to wait until there's some technology available that allow us to try again. And there's always new pests we need to worry about. At the top right, there's a photograph of a rainbow skink, which is, I think it's an Australian import. which is displacing the native skink, and it's slowly moving south as climate change heats warms up the country, and they have been found 500 kilometres north of Christchurch. Argentine ants also we don't want on the island, and again they're in Christchurch, so we're very, very careful that we don't get them there. So the map on the left shows the location of all the traps we have on the island. And between Quail Island and the mainland, there's another little island called King Billy Island. And that's a very useful staging point because the pests, if they're coming to the island, they'll generally go to King Billy Island first. And we have many traps on King Billy Island, so they tend to get intercepted there before they'll get to the mainland. So we get the occasional stoat on the island, but we haven't had one there for a few years now. And we've been rat-free since 2002. People may be familiar with tracking tunnels, but the photograph on the left-hand side is a cardboard tracking paper. These are placed inside plastic tracking tunnels, and they're baited with peanut butter to attract rats and stoats or mice. And we use these to test that we haven't got rats on the island. So as you can see, all those little footprints are mice over one night. So the density of mice on the island is quite alarming. Yeah, and the photograph on the right, top right, is of a stoat, not taken on the island. That was taken fairly close to the island. And bottom right are the fallow deer, which are causing us the problems at the moment. And weeds are the other issue we have. I don't know if any of these names are familiar to you. They may be. The gorse, thistles, and broom, Scotch broom are our biggest problems. But in there you can see garden plants like elderberry and briar rose that are also a problem. So as well as every mammalian pest that the Europeans brought to New Zealand, they brought all their weeds as well. So we have an enormous problem with weeds. Wilding pines, which are the pines which escaped from their plantation forests, are now the #1 weed pest in New Zealand. So not only do we eradicate pests and plant trees and pull out weeds, we do have an education focus as well. So we get school groups and scout groups and service groups to the island. We take them on guided tours and show them the island. And Mohini's been involved in a summer volunteers program where we run guided walks with people over the summer holidays.
Yeah, and we have a group of students coming from Florida every year on exchange students.
Yes, where the earlier photograph of the tussocks for the last, must be 10 or 12 years, we've had a group of students from Florida State University who come over here every July and help us with that work. We have a Chilean student on the island at the moment doing a carbon sequestration study. And we always have Lincoln University students coming to the island for study as well. So there are a lot of experiments going on the island because it's an ideal experimentation ground. Okay, I think that would be.
Yeah, and like Ian was saying that our trust is not just about planting and maintaining the plants, but it's also about educating people in general, especially involving children. So we do have family-friendly planting sometimes,
Yes.
where we allow children to accompany their parents, or as long as they are accompanied by somebody. And well, our message is really to take care of the nature and regenerate and maintain it. And we have an Easter egg hunt every year, usually on the island. Didn't happen this year because of COVID. And that's a fantastic opportunity for us again to engage with the members of public, because kids love coming on the island and hunting for eggs, Easter eggs. So that's an opportunity for us to let people know about our work as well. So that's it from us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohini. Thank you, Jan sir.
you.
मी आता हिने मोहिनीने सांगितलं तसं ईस्टर्न एग. सो आय थिंक लास्ट इयर when we went there on Quail Island, the Easter eggs हे होती.
You are right. Yes.
And we could really see, म्हणजे आम्हाला आश्चर्य वाटलं की अगदी 2-3 वर्षाच्या मुलांना घेऊन किंवा खूपशा प्रेग्नंट यंग वुड बी मदर्स सुद्धा आल्या होत्या. आणखीन सगळीकडे फिरून त्यांनी ते एग्स मुलांनी हे केली. आणि त्यावेळेला काही म्हणजे ऍक्टिव्हिटीज ऑल्सो वेअर प्लॅन देअर. तर वेगवेगळ्या लेवल्सना तो अवेअरनेस क्रिएट करायचं मोठं काम. 2-3 गोष्टी मला तिथे जाणवलेल्या होत्या मोहिनी, की गवताचं प्लांटिंग सहसा कोणी करत नाही. युजली लोक झाडं म्हणजे वृक्ष लागवड असते. म्हणजे तर दॅट वॉज अ व्हेरी गुड थिंग की तुम्ही ग्रासेस म्हणजे तुमचं ते
टसक जे आहे ते सगळ्या ठिकाणी लावलं जातं.
हा, तर ते पण त्याचं प्लांटिंग केलं होतं. त्याची नर्सरी तू दाखवली होतीस आम्हाला, मला आठवतंय. सो दॅट वॉज रिअली व्हेरी म्हणजे एक वेगळी गोष्ट जाणवली होती की गवताला पण तुम्ही तिथे महत्व दिलेलं आहे. आणि व्हॉलंटिअरिंगच्या माध्यमातून एवढं मोठं काम म्हणजे खूप अवघड आहे एवढ्या वर्ष कन्सिस्टंटली. सो कॉंग्रॅच्युलेशन्स अँड ऑल द बेस्ट फॉर युअर टीम. कोणी काही प्रश्न आहेत का आपण जस्ट बघूया.
कोणाला काही प्रश्न असतील तर आपण चॅट वर विचारू शकता.
If anybody would like to get in touch with Ian, the email address is there on the slide. Or if you just Google Quail Island Trust, I'm sure you can find our details there as well.
सगळ्यात खूप छान आम्हाला गोष्ट आता जी रिसेंटली मोहिनीने सांगितली होती की शी हॅज बीन अपॉइंटेड ॲज अ वन ऑफ द ट्रस्टीज. बरोबर ना मोहिनी? त्यामुळे वी रिअली फील प्राऊड ऑफ यू. खूप छान म्हणजे तुझ्या डेडिकेशनला त्यांनी दिलेली ही पावती आहे. सो दॅट्स अ ग्रेट फीलिंग फॉर अस. आणि छान वाटलं तुमचा आज सगळा हा अनुभव आमच्या लोकांबरोबर. कारण आमच्या इथे रिस्टोरेशनचे हे चालू असतात म्हणजे प्रोग्राम्स. हॉलिस्टिक व्ह्यू आणि तुम्ही काय करता ते पण आज समजून घ्यायला छान वाटलं.
आणि अजून एक आहे म्हणजे हल्ली कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर खूप म्हणजे तिथले ग्रुप्स खूप आमच्याकडे येतात प्लांटिंग साठी. कारण हल्ली मला वाटतं कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टरमध्ये पण एक अवेअरनेस आला आहे की त्यांच्या स्टाफला, एम्प्लॉईजना जे इंटरेस्टेड आहेत त्यांना ते स्पॉन्सर करतात. म्हणजे त्यांना कधीतरी वेळ देतात ते आयलंडवर यायला, नाहीतर मग त्यांना त्या दिवशी फूड आणि इतर गोष्टी देऊन. सो इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ अन ऑपॉर्च्युनिटी फॉर देम टू सोशलाइज एज वेल अँड टू कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट टू restoration efforts.
आणि मला आठवतंय की ते मला वाटतं मनुका म्हणजे ते हनी हे असणारी जी प्लांट्स आहेत नेटिव्ह ती पण तुम्ही खूप तिकडे लावलेली आहेत. आणि तुमच्याकडे मधमाशांच्या पेट्या पण ठेवता का नाही? तसं काय असतं त्या?
आम्ही म्हणजे तिथे तसं आम्ही फक्त बीज ना सगळं मिळायला पाहिजे. मध आहे तो
तुम्ही हार्वेस्ट. ओके, ग्रेट.
म्हणजे आम्ही काहीच घेत नाही. नेचर जे आपल्याला देतो ते परत नेचरच्या मिळायला पाहिजे.
कारण बऱ्याच ठिकाणी तिकडे बघितल्या होत्या पण सरप्राइझिंगली क्वेल आयलंडवर मी नव्हत्या बघितल्या.
बरोबर.
सो ग्रेट. बहुतेक नाहीये तसं दिसतंय.
हा प्रश्न काही कोणाचे आलेले दिसत नाही.
अभिरामने फक्त आधी म्हणलं होतं की with Zoom it's a nice opportunity to listen to all these experts आणि सगळ्यांचं काम आपण शेअर करू शकतो.
आणि आता आमच्याकडे डॉक्टर कोरे मॅडम आहेत. शी इज फ्रॉम आयुर्वेदा. शी इज आयुर्वेदा डॉक्टर and she has asked a query: are some medicinal plants also planted along with the grasses there? Are local any ethno-medicine plants planted on a Quail Island?
Any local?
Yeah, like, do we plant any medicinal, like, you know, I mean,
Well, a lot of we only plant trees and shrubs which are local to the area. So any seed is collected within probably a 10-kilometre radius of Quail Island.
Okay.
All the plants, a lot of our plants had medicinal purposes for Maori, like kawa I mentioned before. So all these native plants have got medicinal uses. You must have mentioned manuka before, manuka honey. So all those plants have got medicinal purposes, but we don't specifically do that.
म्हणजे इथे मला नेहमी इथे मावरी लोकांचं सगळं बघून आपली आठवण होते की आपलं जे असं एन्शियंट कल्चर आणि ट्रॅडिशन्स आहेत आणि आपण जेवढं निसर्गामधनं मेडिसिन साठी एस्पेशली घेतो की मी नेहमी माझ्या फ्रेंड्सना पण सांगते की माझ्या किचन मध्ये माझं मेडिसिन्स असतात सगळी. त्याच्यामुळे आपल्या इथे हे खूप असतं की म्हणजे ओवा समजा पोटदुखी असेल तर आपण पटकन ओवा खातो. तर इथे मावरी लोकांचं मी एक पाहिलं की ते पण सगळ्या झाडांचा मेडिसिन साठी उपयोग पूर्वी करायचे, पण अनफॉर्च्युनेटली हल्ली असं काही होत नाहीये आणि ते फक्त मला वाटतं फक्त साईनबोर्ड वरच ते राहिलेलं आहे की कशासाठी कुठलं झाड वापरायचंय. आय थिंक कावा वॉज युज्ड फॉर मेकिंग टी.
Yes, yeah. Kawa is made for tea.
Yeah.
So for example, Koromiko here is one we plant, and Maori used it for, they chewed the leaves for dysentery, diarrhea, and to aid the delivery of babies. So
every tree, I'm sure they had some purpose, didn't they? Like you can, I mean, Kanuka and Manuka is a classic example that when the Europeans arrived here, they didn't know the properties of the honey. And I think that were discovered much later. And now it's marketed as New Zealand honey, but actually they did not value Kanuka or Manuka, and they never planted them. If they were there, they were kind of thought of as weeds almost.
Yes, most of the a lot of the farmland used to be Kanuka and Manuka forest. So a lot of that was destroyed. Even back in the 1960s, they were still cutting it down. And now, of course, we're all busily planting it again. So.
प्रश्न आहे की we visited Phillip Island in Australia. There was evening show of penguin arrivals. They used to say these penguins are coming from New Zealand. Is it true or just to say?
What was coming from New Zealand there?
So they visited Phillip Island in Australia. The penguins, they said that they were going there from New Zealand.
I don't know if they would go that far. They are the same species. The Australians call them the little penguin or the fairy penguin. What did they call the penguins? Do you remember?
There is a question from somebody, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so the blue penguin is the same penguin as the ones on Phillip Island. In fact, the one we have in Canterbury, the white-flippered penguin, is more closely related to the penguins on Phillip Island than they are related to the ones at Oamaru. But whether they swim that far, I don't know. I doubt it somehow.
Can you elaborate on the work penguin वर काम केलं ते सांगायचं? त्यांनी व्हाईट आयलंड वर पेंग्विन याच्यावर क्वेल आयलंड.
हा त्यांनी मगाशी सांगितलंय. म्हणजे पेंग्विनसाठी तुम्ही काही स्पेशल एफर्ट्स केले आहेत का मोहिनी तिथे?
टेस्टिंग केलं त्यासाठी.
Any special efforts for penguins?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we have the nests to
Yeah.
actually.
We can show them that. Yeah, so you can see in this photograph here, these penguins are in artificial nesting boxes. So I can't remember how many we've got around the island, but there's probably about 40 of these boxes. We put another 30 out a few years ago in likely places, but none of them have been occupied as yet because we've had this dramatic plunge in the number of nests, number of birds nesting. So we don't know why that is. One of the thoughts is that the increasing sea temperatures means that the penguins have to dive deeper for their food and they get exhausted. A penguin won't return to its chick unless it's got enough food for the chick. So if a penguin out at sea can't get enough food, it won't come back to the chick until it's got enough. So the chick can be on the mainland for quite some time and may die in the interim if the parent can't get enough food. The other thing which has been happening since we had our earthquakes here 10 years ago is that they're rebuilding the port on the other side of the harbour, and they're getting an increase in the number of penguins on that side of the harbour. So what we hope is that they're actually attracting our penguins over to the other side of the harbour. So maybe our penguins have gone on a little holiday. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Mukund Kazare has said, thank you very much, Jan Mohini, for excellent presentation of your inspiring work in New Zealand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was a great sharing of work, and thank you very much. Maybe we'll have you again, Mohini, on your other works in this field.
Yeah.
In future.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Sunil, and thank you to
ma'am.
Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini for this opportunity.
Yeah.
We are very happy to share our experience, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I must say that it's a great initiative by you both and by the other members because these are really challenging circumstances, but you are still keeping people connected through the Zoom presentations. So great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an amazing piece of technology, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
It's like science fiction.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.